Josh Handt for Lifestyle Locker Radio. This is episode 156. This is the Race to 100, episode 16. This is the final episode for this journey of the Hamilton Marathon. We have the best guest we've ever had. I hope you're all ready. This is my wife, Meredith Handt. So welcome.
Thank you.
So what she's going to do, she's going to give some awesome insight to how the other side of the race looked and how the training, all of these things. I want her to share some of that. And she'll also, this is going to be good for those of you that are spouse teams. It doesn't make a difference who's doing an event or training, and if whether it's a man, woman, it doesn't make a difference. But this is great because this is part of building a relationship and having a relationship that's sustainable for this type of event, because they are time consuming, and this can put a strain on the relationship. So I want to make sure everybody kind of pays attention here, because we want to make sure you're going to win. We don't want you to lose in this process. So I'm going to share with you, I want to do first a little quick update on my knee. So my knee, here's the MRI report. Here's the impression. Knee effusion. So, right, we got fluid in the knee. Medial meniscus tears. Sprain of the fibular collateral ligament with a lateral soft tissue swelling. And what that means, the fibular collateral ligament is the outside of the knee where the top bone, the femur, and the fibula, which is part of your lower leg, they attach. So I strained that, swelling, yes, pain, all the above. So now we know what's going on. The meniscus is probably old injury. I have no idea. We're going to find out. I do have an orthopedic consult on Tuesday, so we can go over the MRI together. So we're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to the race day. We're going to go maybe even a little bit before. I want to talk a little bit about training, but also talk a little bit about how the event went from the other perspective. So training-wise, what kind of advice would you maybe give a spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, or something like that is living with a crazy person like myself that likes to train long hours and do things that are, a little on the abnormal side?
Time management and planning is key. And then I would also say that, you yourself have to prepare as well to know what you're going to get into and what your responsibilities might be. So definitely have those conversations about, what you're going to need and what your role might be.
Yeah, and don't always wait for the last minute, because that's sometimes what may happen. And I definitely want to stress, time management, but also just your self-management of being proactive ahead of schedule. And as in your training, you're going to decide and figure out what you're going to need to learn, what you're going to need to, the racer, if you will, is going to need to have done ahead of time. I waited a little bit late, but I did a lot of learning along this journey, from reading books to watching movies and documentaries on running and endurance running. I maybe have an advantage or had an advantage over guys and gals that are running, 20 years ago doing these ultra marathons when they were like this random crazy thing. So do some of your research if you want, and it's going to help you think about food and fuel and everything. So that's the training side. So they all heard the last episode on, how my marathon went for me, and I, thanking the team and all this stuff. But from your perspective, when we set up, it was me, you, your mom's boyfriend, Sam. So it's Ginny and Sam, right? They had this huge truck camper, so they set up like the home base, right? Like this was like our home base, and we had my truck loaded with gear, which was enough for looked like a freaking week vacation. But this was all food and fuel and maybe a tent if it was raining and other things like that. So what was your perspective just on that initial part of the event?
Well, it definitely helped me that Josh had created a Word document that went through his anticipated times for his laps and when he should be coming in or would like to be coming in. So that helped as far as timing. And then he broke down each lap as far as what he would want to eat, to wear, to hydrate with, and that helped me, to prepare for each lap. A little guide, like a checklist.
Yeah, it was good. I would have mentally and physically liked a little more time. Like when we got to the race, the race coordinators got there a little later than they should have as well. But we got there and we're just setting stuff up and taking my time. It was 30, 34 degrees. It was pretty chilly when we were setting up, and I remember just looking at my watch, going, "Holy crap! The race is starting in 5 minutes or something like that," and we all kind of had to hustle and go. So once the race was started, how did it look from the other side, as far as not how was I running, but how easy was it to organize things and figure things out once everything started?
Well, once you headed out on your first lap, that was my time to really get acquainted with where things were because Josh had prepared them the night and the day before. And so I was just kind of investigating into the different bins and whatnot to see where things were. There came a point where I couldn't find a specific item that he wanted. And I literally ended up just saying to myself, like, how would Josh think? And then I
Right.
found it. Very well hidden. But
I knew where it was probably, but
yeah, for sure. But no, I mean, it was a lot of anticipation on my part, really thinking like he would think, and making sure I was at the checkpoint in enough time, always giving myself enough time to be there well in advance of when he came through. Also, bring anything he had written down on the checklist for that point in time, but use common sense to anticipate his needs.
yeah, that's key. Knowing the person you're with, because as I was prepping my list, I could only think what I could think of. But usually, the other half in your life, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be, family, they're gonna know a little more about you than you may even think they know, and just kind of have that anticipation, everything ready to move forward. So as we're going through the race, I heard about the injury, obviously. When did you start? And I know we mentioned before we don't have like the exact, but when did you start to notice, you know, things were a little bizarre around?
It was around, let's say, mile 20, but Josh had used the walkie-talkie to let us know that he needed a knee wrap, which was not a good sign for me. But I brought it to him and we helped him with it, and I hoped that that would literally give him the support that he would need to carry through. The next lap he returned, and I could tell that things had not improved. Although I think it was the next lap, his attitude was a little bit better. So then I was hopeful again. But, as he continued to come through, I could see him deteriorating. I could see it in his gait, in his face, in his whole demeanor. So really, I had to make sure that I wasn't conveying anything to him. I knew if he needed to stop, it would be on his terms, and he would only stop when the pain got to be unbearable. And, nothing I could say or do or should say or do would change that. So, I just tried to maintain a positive mindset and, what will be, and, just provide whatever I could to keep him going, as long as he needed to.
Yeah, and we this is actually, for those that you're not gonna all know this, but we just did this recording before. This is number 2. That little microphone error. So I don't want to miss some of the good, important things that she spoke about or I spoke about. And you mentioned like key things were happening. Key people were showing up
Right.
as the event was progressing. Hours and hours into the event. Like, talk about that. That was
Okay.
kind of neat.
So I was just saying that it seemed, that people showed up when they needed to be there and when they should be there. We had family there, motivating Josh, cheering him on, providing a little comic relief. We had my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and our nephews there running around, and my mom and her boyfriend, and we had made signs. So that was a great way to kick things off. And then, some of our friends had shown up later on that provided some first aid when needed and chiropractic adjustments. And both of those people also being, ultra runners themselves. So they had that experience, which was helpful to me and, of course, helpful to Josh. So,
Yeah, it was really great. Having like obviously the base camp set up, and initially that was really cool, knowing that if I needed to stop, if the weather changed, if I needed to change clothes right away, I could have an indoor space for a minute or two to go change and run back out. And then also, like we said, having some of that comic relief with my nephew Jack running alongside with me as I'm getting ready to go through going through the checkpoint. And as I'm leaving, him and my brother-in-law were running, but Jack was by himself, and just watching him like run on the grass trying to keep up with me at 2 years old was a little difficult. But face planting in the grass, I mean, it was fun. And then everybody, they ended up leaving. I mean, for me, time was moving at a different pace in the world, in my mind, and I didn't realize how many hours had gone by. But then our friend Tom showed up, the chiropractor. I was able to get adjusted, which was so cool. He was there with his girlfriend, so they were able to hang out and have a good time as well, because as cool as it is having a crew, most of the time they're not with you, right? It's like being like at a NASCAR race or Le Mans race or something. They're going in, and the team shows up and fixes you, if you will, and then sends you on your way so you can keep spinning, keep moving. And then John shows up, who's been on the show before. He did that 50-mile Go Ruck with me. Super smart guy. And I was grateful to have him as an athletic trainer to say, hey, listen, your knee's pretty screwed up. Let me help the wrap. Let me do it right. Let me do all this stuff. And it was neat to see that the universe paid attention. It was kind of, now I think of it that way, it was really neat to do that.
And he was there to deal with the feet, which is something I don't do.
Yeah. So, and I don't remember if everybody's seen those pictures. We'll share some of those pictures with you. But what was really interesting, and now I think about this in hindsight, things show up for the right reason at the right time. And I could not have planned when Tom showed up. It was perfect. I could not have planned when John showed up. It was just perfect. And even in the beginning, having those initial boosts of like encouragement and seeing family, the motivation was really great. And something that I want to share that I think is super important is when you're doing a long-term event, maybe not a 5K, right? This is going to be something marathon plus. Having this checklist, having some really good organization is really crucial for the crew captain, right? And Meredith did a pretty awesome job in this. I didn't ask for this, but she figured it out lap one, like what needed to happen. So talk to everybody how you started to organize things and plan for things and figure things out and know like when things were getting bad, because you're able to track the problem also.
Sure. So I had, sheets of paper, and each sheet of paper I would write down how many laps were left and record that for myself. I'd write down his time in and then his time back out on the course, and then how much time I would anticipate the next lap taking. Of course, I'd always do the fastest estimation just to make sure I was there in enough time. And just really keeping track of the time was important for me. I also wrote down anything he consumed, anything he took with him. It was important for me to also note any comments he made because I knew the time would come when we'd be having these conversations and there'd be a lot of questions. When did this happen? When did I say that? When did I need that? So any notable observations, I just jotted them down. So we had pretty much like a diary of the whole thing. To help me during the event and then to help us after the event.
That's key because you need to learn from your screw ups and knowing where you're going into the unknown. For me, I couldn't have planned the knee injury, but I knew after mile 50 is unknown territory. I made it to 52.4 without the pain. Energy was fine, and I really think that has to do with the way I was hydrating the day before, but during the event, having the hydration, having the fuel I needed, because the best advice, and I don't remember if I did mention this, having two veterans talking to them during the run, they talked about running uphill, or walking uphill, running on the flats, and maybe running carefully downhill. But a lot of other people had messaged me that are ultra runners and said, hey, you don't want to fail, you need to eat. Don't fail, you need to make sure you're hydrating. And even Dr. Gordon Pedersen, who I interviewed a couple days before the event, he talked to me a ton about hydration and how important it is to have that done even the day before, and then just be very, very consistent in small quantities consistently. And I think we did a pretty awesome job at making sure I at least had that like half a pint of fuel, that electrolyte mix, and the chia drink. That I think that was part of my savior during the event. I wish I could have drank away the pain. I'm sure I could have, but I wasn't going to do that. And the crazy thing is, the race director, as I'm coming through that final lap, actually talk about there was a guy, Paul, which I met a couple times intermittently throughout those 52 miles, a little bit older than me, way taller than me. I'm like 6'1", 6'2". This guy was I don't even know, 6'6". His one step was 4 of mine. But I had passed him on that last lap. I was feeling a little bit better power walking on the flats. And I just, said hi to him. He was fixing his headlamp, and I just went. And it was a smooth trail. So I'm going. And I expect to see, the headlight behind me, this weird, nighttime in the woods is kind of crazy. But I expected to see him pass me, or this is gonna happen. So I think this loop is a 6.5 mile loop that I was on, or eight. No, this is a big loop. This was, I think, the 7 mile loop, and I get past all the flasks, get past all this stuff. I'm like, holy cow, he didn't pass me. I hope hope this guy's all right. And I get to the first big downhill. This is before the phone call to Meredith, and holy cow, that's when the pain went from going from a power walk to walking, like a decrepit person with broken bones in their body, and moving 1 mile an hour downhill. And this guy Paul stops, like, "Hey Josh, how you doing? Are you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm not so hot right now. I may have to DNF." And I'm going down this hill. They pass me. We catch a guy going back the other direction who was lost, and I turn him around. But Paul and this guy take off. I see the headlamps disappearing, and he ends up going across the checkpoint about 10 minutes ahead of me. So.
Yeah, so just going back, you mentioned the phone call. It was like maybe around 9 o'clock, and I was preparing his last meal. So I got the phone call from Josh, and, I kind of said, "Do you want us to come back and try to find you?" And he said, "No, he's just going to finish." So I'm waiting at the checkpoint, and Paul comes running through and says, "I just don't have it in me to finish, but there's a guy out there that was really trucking along pretty nicely, and now he has a knee injury, and I'm concerned about him." And right away I said, "That's my husband." And then it was just kind of counting down the minutes and the seconds until he came through that checkpoint for the final time, just to see what kind of a state he was in, because it was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and she didn't. I don't know if you said this on this recording, but her and my friend John or she wanted to take my friend John to run backwards or come backwards on the course to get me. But I advised. I said, "Please no. I need to live in my own misery for a little bit, in my pain." And coming across that finish line, even the race director said, "I could see your headlamp going." Normally when someone's running that knows what they're doing in a distance event, you don't see the headlamp bouncing. Mine was going left and right like the top of a mast on a sailboat in a storm because of the injury, and offer me meds and all this stuff. And one that would not be good, because if you're taking meds to get through an event, that means, I think, that's cheating first, but also you're numbing problems, which can become, as John said, a big disability. A pain or disability, what do you want? So I was willing to live. Obviously, I wouldn't take the meds anyway, but I was willing to live with the pain. I earned it, and I think that's part of the growth process and the learning process. And it was an awesome journey. Everybody came out. My mother even woke up, came outside without her glasses on. Like, "Is Josh here?" Like 3 feet in front of me, to give me a hug, as stinky as I was. And then, in the RV, I had to get changed. And my previous events, I couldn't. And this is funny. My first marathon was in a nor'easter, and I was drenched to the bone, frozen, pre-hypothermic. And Meredith had to yank my socks off. We're inside the Bear Mountain Inn in New York in the heat, and she's ripping my socks off. I had to get my leggings off. I was so cold, my hands didn't function. So I'm thinking I may need help getting my compression socks off and all this stuff. So we get in there, and I take my stuff off. I was actually fine, and that my feet came out, and that's when she tag team. She called John. "John, can you can you
I don't do feet.
Can you help?" But that was the realization. Like, holy cow, I got pretty banged up, and my knee was really swollen. If you haven't seen the images, again, I'll share my feet and my knees on social. But until the next event. Any final words you want to share with anybody listening about doing this as a team?
Just very key to know your competitor and think like they do. Plan, and strategize. Be really organized.
Yeah, who's the competitor? Who's the biggest competitor, you think?
Who's the biggest competitor?
To me, I'm saying that joking seriously, because I need to know my own weaknesses at this point, and if I get my ego, I gotta run my own race. If I get my ego ahead, I'm gonna screw myself early in the game. But thank you so much, everybody. Meredith, Mimi, my sweetheart. She was the most badass captain we can have, crew captain on this event, and I'm pumped to have her for the rest of the events for the rest of my life. And I've also tried convincing her maybe we can pick some travel around some cool events, and I don't know how well that'll work or not. but we'll figure that part out. That's our job on our journey. So everyone, thank you so much for listening. Have a good day, evening, or night, wherever and whenever you are listening. We will see you on the next episode, back for our regular programming. All right, y'all. Peace out.